Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and transformational life coach and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Welcome back, guys. I hope you are having a beautiful day so far. I am so thrilled to introduce today's guest to you. Today, we're chatting with Meghan Reese. She is a grieving daughter, a mental health counseling student, a writer, and an advocate for grievers far and wide. Her heart is deeply invested in issues surrounding grief, end-of-life care, and cancer awareness for both patients and caregivers. And she is also a wife and mom to 2 boys. Meghan lost her mom, her best friend, 2 years ago to ovarian and breast cancer after a very challenging 2-year journey filled with hospital stays, lots of tears, moments of fear, and so many good times and adventures that they shared together. And she shared with me, and I just think this is so beautiful and heartbreaking and poetic, but her mom was a cardiac nurse and a fierce advocate for her patients. And now her mom's spirit is Meghan's legacy to continue, which is why she is on the path to become a mental health counselor herself, which I just think is so empowering and so incredible. In this episode together, we get into so many aspects of grief and how this can show up and infiltrate itself in our lives, and how it can even affect relationships or our marriages, and just all of the ways that it can manifest itself, and how to cope with this and how to navigate this. And I know you are truly going to appreciate Meghan's vulnerability, her hilarious sense of humor. She is just such a joy and a light to talk to, and her refreshing, honest way of looking at grief and loss and coping with it. And I am just so excited to share her perspective with you all today. So that being said, enough of my talking. Let's get into it. Meghan, welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I am so excited to have you here today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. And I really wanted you on, not only because of your story of loss, which we will definitely get to, and I just empathize with some of what you have been through in my own journey, but you have very relatable content, and you really, what I love about you is you really just tell it like it is. It is kind of a no BS approach to grief, which I just love. It's so raw. It's so like just hard hitting in the best way. So I'm just really excited for this conversation, and you are just such a fun, bright light in this grief space. So I'm just very thankful for you, and I'm really excited for you to be here.
Thank you so much. It's mutual, and it's also refreshing to hear people say that the honesty is welcomed because I gotta say, I'm not for everybody, especially in grief. So it's really lovely. And I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. So typically, I love just starting off with guests, just telling us a little bit about yourself. Of course, we will dive into your journey of loss and grief, but I like to just start off sometimes on a little bit of a high note,
Yes.
and just have you tell us who you are, whatever you want to share, fun facts, just how everyone can kind of just get to know you a little bit better.
Yes, I'll start. I like the idea of starting off on a high note, since we'll get
Just
in.
a little higher than usual.
Yeah, we'll go pretty and however we end.
And then we'll get dark.
Yes, and then we'll get dark. What people it may evolve through the podcast that people will hear it, but I'm originally from the South. I think I live in Colorado now, so I am a Southern girl, a grit, as my mama would say, girls raised in the South. A lot of people don't know that acronym for grits, but I wanted to lead with that. It's something that I don't talk about often since I'm in Colorado. I'm not a natural born
Coloradan.
Can't even say it appropriately. I'm so Southern. But yeah, and so originally from the South, live in Colorado with my family now. I have a wife and 2 kids. Actually, today's the first day of school.
Ooh,
exciting. Middle schooler and second grader. Screams middle school around here. And I was a nonprofit executive director for most of my career. And after going through the grief and loss experience, I decided to change my career, go back to school. What a great time to overhaul your entire life.
Right. Nothing like a devastating loss to
Feel like, oh, you're finding purpose. I'm like, I'm not sure that was my intention. I think I was just
But here
Done
I
with the BS.
am.
Yeah. Like, you know what? You learn a lot that way. And so it's really actually been a beautiful experience. But again, just motherhood, as you know, as a new mom, just kind of getting into the swing of things. Trying to think of something quirky about me. I am an avid tea and coffee drinker. Those are about the only beverages I consume. I probably, from what you know, have a pretty dark sense of humor, which has gotten me through some really
Live for it.
hard times. Yes. And I binge on Grey's Anatomy once a year.
A must.
I know. I'm like, if you haven't seen it 7 times, what are you doing with your life?
What
Like
are you doing?
it's griefy and dark and twisty. So I'm in it. I'm
I
in it.
love it.
Um, I think that's my high. That's
Yeah.
me starting high.
That's us starting off on the light foot.
Incorporating the dark and twisty in advance.
Oh my God. I
Yeah.
love it though. We have to, I don't know. I am a proponent of dark humor. I know there's definitely some other people that we are connected with in the group space of Instagram that lean into that dark humor a little bit too. And you're right, it's not for everybody. And especially like depending on where you are in your grieving journey, I understand that could be a factor as well, where you're just like, I can't laugh about this yet. Y'all are like too much for me. So
Timing
listen,
is
this
appropriate.
conversation might be a little down the line for some people, but I always like to say, like, listen with an open heart and mind, consume with an open heart and mind, know when it's not for you. But no, like I said, I appreciate what you put out there because there is like an unapologetic like nature that we have to have with our grief sometimes, I feel like, and talking about it and owning it and owning those feelings. And I think you just do such a beautiful job of like giving people permission to like admit the dark stuff or admit how they're feeling or really like lean into that and knowing that that is a natural part of the process and that it's not something we have to be ashamed about. And it's just like, just put it out there like, this is what I'm feeling. This is shit. Is anyone else feeling this way too? Like, just very, welcome to this club we didn't ask to be a part of, you know?
Exactly. I think part of my I've always been this way. And so of course, it aligns with my grief journey, but part of it too is my mom was very optimistic,
Mm,
very sweet. Not that I'm not, but like I have a harder edge
yeah.
than my mom. Like everybody loved my mom. She was sweet as could be, stubborn, but very lovely. And
Okay.
she
Yeah.
had, I think when she was diagnosed with cancer and then we, kind of went through that process, is when I kind of shifted. And I knew that through the anticipatory grief process, that I was just like, when people ask me how I was, I'm like, I'm really shitty.
Yeah.
People are like, oh,
Oh,
what did you want
sorry
me to
I
say?
asked.
I'm like, I'm not fine. It's like,
Yeah.
what's going to be in store for my mom in the future. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because my mom kind of got to that place where had some dark humor at the end. And it really was what got us through some of the
Yeah.
worst. She played jokes on my wife. We can get to that. They were so inappropriate.
Oh my
And
God.
to this day, they're like my favorite part,
Love
if you
it.
have a favorite part of like a hospice
Yeah.
story. Like those are the things that
Oh.
on our darkest days
Mm-hmm.
will
Just
help you out of a hole.
oh,
Yeah.
that little bit of like okay, so actually the perfect segue. Let's
We're
talk
gonna
about
accidentally
first of all.
segue.
No, it's okay. That was literally I was gonna segue right into that. And so yeah, so spoiler alert, you have lost your mom.
I know. Look at me jumping ahead. Do I do that? Let me get to the end and then we'll go back.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some tips that you have for people? No. So talk about your mom. What was her name? And yeah, tell us a little bit about her, but also I would love for you to, as much as you're comfortable with, tell us a little bit about her cancer journey. I again can empathize in my own way. Also lost my mom to cancer. But feel free to again, however much detail you want to go into, but you mentioned anticipatory grief, which I know there are listeners here that are or are dealing with anticipatory grief either currently or they're like trying to process what happened, even if their person has died now, and just what that process was like for her, for you, everyone involved.
Got it. Well, I'll start with my mom. So
Mhm.
her name was Kathy. However, she was only known as Meme in our house for like the last decade. She was originally going to be Meemaw.
Oh,
It, very Southern. She's like, I think it's even too Southern for me. And my son would only say meme. Like,
Yeah. So
did
just
not
stuck.
call her Meemaw. He said meme, so it just stuck.
I love
And so
that.
that's how we always refer to her. Even when I write on Instagram, I'm like, I can't, I say meme and no,
It's
like,
just weird to like call her anything else. Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna say mom or Kathy.
Yeah.
Like I said, she was a independent, fiercely stubborn, super sweet woman. She was very artistic. She was a nurse for all of my life. So for over 40 years, she was a cardiac nurse.
Oh my God.
I tell everybody how fitting it was that like I have a broken heart, but yet my mom was a
Oh,
cardiac nurse who fixed hearts. And so it's kind of my legacy.
so poetic. Oh my God.
I didn't plan it.
Yeah. You can't
Accidentally
make this stuff
poetic.
up. Yeah. No.
Um, so I feel like part of her legacy is me honoring healing people's hearts and helping people because she did it physically and I hope to do it in other ways.
Emotionally almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the other ways. Yeah, so she was a great nurse, charge nurse. She was a teacher. She was also a beautiful artist, but never liked to share. She was kind of
Mm.
like me. I never liked to share my writing with people. And my mom never liked to share her art. And that's part of why I decided, oh, I'll start an Instagram and share it. And everybody around me is like, uh-oh.
What's gonna come out of her mouth?
Yeah, because I never really shared openly. I'm like, my mom never really felt comfortable sharing her art. It was something internal
Oh.
to her that was really like
Yeah.
prized possession to her. And she didn't want to like,
My
I don't
dad was
know.
kind of like that too. He also was an artist and he
Okay.
did share some of it, but yeah, I was very humble with it and like,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
My mom was too. So I'm like, oh, I'll just go the opposite and
Just balls to the wall,
just
like,
balls to the wall, put it out there. Yeah, she's a phenomenal artist, love flamingos. I post a lot about signs from her, and they involve something quirky, like a flamingo or a bear or some weird sign. We always called her hokey. Like growing up in the South, she was the weird one in the family. Like for all of her brothers and her like traditional Irish Catholic family, she did acupuncture and ate weird, was
yeah,
eating different foods. And her family was always like,
black
you're
sheep
so
of the family.
weird and hokey and because she was
Yeah.
doing all like the modern medicine things before or contemporary medicine now that people weren't doing back then in like the 80s,
Mhm.
90s. So she was a pioneer, I'll
Very
say,
ahead of her time. Yeah.
very ahead of her time with alternative medicine, going, yoga, meditation, all
Oh
of
my
that
gosh, it sounds
before.
exactly like my mom. This is crazy. That's weird synchronicities going up. Very, very similar. That's amazing.
They're gonna be buddies now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
So she was very, very quirky. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but like as I get older and as time lapses since her passing, I'm like indirectly becoming her. Like, we
oh,
become
yeah.
our parents, right? But like
It's terrifying.
my wife is like, uh, you sound just like your
We need
mom.
to talk.
I'm like, you're welcome. You mean it as a compliment, right?
You will always be on your toes. You will not have a boring life.
Yes. I'm like, we don't need dull around here. Not that we ever have it
No.
anyway.
No, seriously. Oh my God. Okay, well, she sounds incredible. So talk to me a little bit about just her cancer journey. When did all of this come about? When was she diagnosed? Like how long was it to passing? Because I hear there's so many variations on this
Yes.
of especially cancer journeys of people I've spoken to and like my parents had two very different stories. My dad was diagnosed and it was like 6 years between diagnosis and passing. Whereas my mom it was like 8, 9 months. So
Very quick.
yeah.
Yeah. So she was diagnosed because it was the pandemic, right? So it was in 2020 and
Hmm.
she had symptoms the year before, but it was in March that March of 2020 when she started having symptoms. But all elective procedures, what they deem elective procedures, were put on
Hmm.
hold. So she wasn't actually diagnosed with ovarian cancer, which is what it started as,
Okay,
until May of 2020. So there were a couple months delay.
got it.
Thought it was stage 4, some other abdominal cancer. So it took a while to really test to figure out the origin of the cancer because of the pandemic,
Wow. Oh my
which unfortunately I hear a lot of stories like that with, colonoscopies and other
God.
preventive measures were put on hold for
Yeah.
that for COVID. So my mom was in that. She actually had breast cancer 15 years before her ovarian cancer journey.
Wow.
So she was a cancer survivor
Alrighty. Yeah.
then. But yeah, I was going to say, I don't say that to a lot of people. And my mom didn't ever like say I was a breast cancer survivor. She just
Yeah.
kind of moved along. I don't know how to explain it. She just didn't want it to be like part of who she was.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
want cancer associated with her.
Mhm.
But she was a breast cancer survivor.
Wow.
So for ovarian cancer, she had it for 2 years.
Okay.
And then towards the end, she was also diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, a different
Okay.
type of cancer than the original.
Okay. Can you tell me what that is? I've never heard of triple negative.
One of the worst, I guess you could say,
Wow.
because it's
Okay.
not as treatable. So
Oh,
triple negative breast cancer is really in and of itself metastatic immediately. That the triple negative has limited options for treatment. There are people who live with it.
mhm.
Obviously we see the commercials now for metastatic breast cancer
Yeah.
treatment. There are more treatments now, but because it was in addition to ovarian cancer, we were
Mhm.
not aware that it was growing either.
Oh,
Um,
God.
so we think it was the triple negative breast cancer and not the ovarian cancer that actually was growing at the end. But by the time we realized that,
It was
you
just
know, yeah, a lot of people live with triple negative breast cancer, like I said,
it's fascinating.
can get more years now with treatment.
Yeah.
We did not realize, who's going to get a second cancer at the same time.
Right.
You don't, you don't really think of that when you're in.
No, like I guess it's not unheard of, but I don't hear of it much to be honest with you. Or it was like they had one, maybe went into remission or something and then got another one, but then
Right.
like both coming back at the same time, or you hear it metastasizing, but not two
Separate
completely different
cancer.
forms.
Right.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we were pretty shocked because the ovarian cancer, we thought we had it under control.
Mhm.
Turns out we did. And it was a whole separate cancer. Luckily, we
Wow.
pushed her physician to do some testing because I just had a feeling. We just had a feeling something was different.
Yeah.
We were actually,
Wow.
in grief, things are different, right? Like we were actually hopeful when we
Yeah.
got the breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
I'm like, yay, there's a lot of treatment for breast cancer.
Right.
So we thought that maybe my mom, and I said, well, the one that we don't want is triple negative because there aren't as many treatment
Mhm.
options, especially after 2 years of chemo. That
Right.
really made a difference. Is, after 2 years of chemo, what could my mom tolerate? And what was she willing to do?
Yeah.
Point? And, we got to a point where she just wasn't willing to do any more treatment because we were talking about a month or two here and there that she would live
It's
longer.
not, yeah, almost like I can empathize with that. Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's the quality of life. It's like, what's it worth? And I mean, we can only know as like bystanders. I can't even imagine, can only begin to imagine what it's like being them in this situation and being faced with that and essentially being faced with your mortality. You're just like, wow, this is like pretty hopeless. Like there's kind of no getting out of this, getting around this. Like, I think
Yeah.
my mom had that feeling at one point as well, and my dad as well. But I think he was more ready to go be with her than he was like trying to take on any kind of other treatment. But okay, so talk to me a little bit about that anticipatory grief that you felt then, because it sounds like she like and her mindset and your guys' mindset and everything throughout this. Just like walk me through what that experience was like for you.
To be honest, like I said, my mom was very optimistic, and obviously the diagnosis hit her hard. It was a complete shock, of course, because ovarian cancer presents as abdominal symptoms.
Okay. You mentioned symptoms. I was wondering. I wasn't sure about ovarian
Yeah,
cancer.
I wanted to mention because September is ovarian cancer
Hmm.
this month. So of
Yeah.
course I'll mention the symptoms, but she had like bloating and feeling full and urinating frequently and
Okay. Interesting.
things that women feel every day.
I was
So,
gonna say.
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Distended abdomen. I mean, the distended abdomen got to a point where we knew something was
It
different.
was just really not. Yeah.
Yeah. But up until then, it was like indigestion, reflux. I mean, just daily things.
Yeah.
And then get bloated. So unfortunately, the signs are not very clear. And by
Right.
the time they present themselves clearly,
Hmm.
you're late stage. And that's why most of ovarian cancers are also diagnosed very
Like
late,
too late, kind of.
not
Yeah.
too late. So I think that her and I both knew immediately that the news was not good
Not.
and that
Yeah.
a lot of people a large majority of ovarian cancer patients don't survive past 5 years. Now, of
Hmm.
course, there's outliers. There,
Yeah.
there are people that, have a shorter duration with the cancer and people that live a really long time. I
Yeah.
co-facilitated groups in my practicum for ovarian cancer patients, and there are 15, 20, 25-year survivors.
Amazing.
And it
Oh,
was,
give me chills.
I know, it was so great. People are like, well, didn't that bother you? I'm like, no, because it wouldn't bother my mom. Like there are people that live
Right.
with it and that's their journey. And it's
Yes.
really amazing to know that people can live with the disease that long. It wasn't my mom's
Yeah.
path,
Yep.
but that people do have that path. But I
Yeah.
think because of that, the anticipatory grief for me was really heavy immediately
Hmm.
because I knew what was going to happen. And it wasn't as much being negative as
Just
the statistics.
realistic,
Yeah.
maybe like,
Yeah. You hope for the best, right? We did
of
treatment. My mom was
course.
a fighter. We were always going to do treatment, but it was always in the back of my mind, like at some point she will make a decision
Yeah.
how, how long she's willing to do this type of treatment and
Yeah.
how long it's working.
Yeah.
So it was very heavy for me. But once we got into the treatment, my mom was a trooper.
Mm.
I mean, we planned so many fun things in between her chemos. And she
Oh,
actually did a little, she said she had 4 to 5 days of utter shit. And my mom did not swear. So it was super cool to
yeah.
see her
Like,
transition.
this is refreshing.
I'm like, Ma, I think when you have cancer, you can swear,
Yeah. Just
but you,
a little bit.
you have been appointed.
Yeah.
So she'd have 4 to 5 bad days and then 3 weeks to recover. And so in
Mhm.
those 3 weeks, we really lived it up and did all the things that she loves. We would
Oh,
drink wine and eat things she wasn't supposed to eat.
yeah.
Did all
It
the
sounds
things.
so bad, but like at that point, like this again, this is so dark. What do you have to lose? You're just like,
Right.
okay,
Oh,
well, I may as well enjoy myself.
I know that the first like 6 months, I was like, Mom, you can't have sugar,
Right, right.
sugar and all this stuff. And I was so annoying about,
Yeah.
about it. She's like, Megan, who cares? Like, she would hoard sugar. Like, we found candy hidden after she passed, like
Oh my
in her dresser. I'm like, of course she hid it from me because I was
that's so
that
funny.
daughter, like, that would lecture her. I became the mom.
I love it. That's
In
hilarious.
hindsight, it didn't matter, but you try
Yeah.
to control what you can and try,
Yeah.
you have
You
the
end
best.
up being the parent of your parent, and then it's like
Yeah.
all bets are off though.
Like, you need to exercise and not eat sugar. And
Yeah.
she bucked the system.
Yeah.
It was,
She was like,
uh,
that's adorable. Okay.
I'm just like a little bee buzzing in her ear, annoying her, and she didn't listen.
Oh
So,
my God. I love it. More power to her,
yes.
honestly. Like, yeah, you guys let them live for what they.
Yeah, like you said, we're on the sidelines and like you're looking at your
Mhm.
parent wanting to take care of them, and
Yeah.
then they're in this battle and they're having their own feelings about it,
Mm.
and she had every right to do whatever she
Whatever the
wanted.
hell, she damn well pleased.
Eat her gummy bears and drink her wine. And if
Yeah.
that's all she wanted to eat that day, I don't really think it impacted her journey.
No.
I mean, there
Right.
are
Not,
people that, do change their diet and it's really great. I think we were at a point where she just
it
wasn't,
just
yeah,
wasn't gonna make that
we're just
difference.
gonna live it up.
Yeah, yeah. How was going through all of this? And actually, how has this been like post loss as well with having kids on top of it? Because, and I ask for a few reasons, but number one, being in parenthood for a very short time now myself, just navigating that without my parents and especially my mom and going to her to talk to about things or ask her questions about when I was a baby or just like did you go through this too and just having that camaraderie. And I know your kids are a little bit older, but still, I mean, doesn't necessarily get easier. It's just harder in different ways, right?
Yes.
um but also just yeah, I mean, and also just coping with the so once she did pass away, just coping with that grief and still having to show up for your family, for your wife, for your kids, like that in and of itself can be so hard, especially in the moment, especially in those early days. But like you're gonna have your off days, or there's gonna be difficult moments. So just especially with having again, just a family to take care of and show up for and be strong for. How have you navigated that as well? Hey, my friend, are you needing some relief from your grief? If so, I have an exciting new offering that will help you get exactly that. My 14-day Relief in Your Grief challenge brings you powerful, impactful, bite sized daily content alongside the perfect meditation. One of the biggest struggles I hear from my members, clients, and people on social media is that they just need some relief from the stress, sadness, and pain that grief and loss can cause. But here's the thing, so many people are lost and unsure about where to start. This can feel like a huge thing to tackle, so we are doing it together and we're starting with just 14 days. Give me 2 weeks and I will help you begin to take that anxiety, heartache, and anguish and turn it into peace, clarity, and hope as you move forward with your grief. Seriously, what do you have to lose by joining? Challenge your grief and give yourself some relief, my friend. I have no doubt this 14 days will be an inspiring, uplifting, perspective changing experience for you. Join now through the link in the show description.
Not well in the beginning. I mean, to be
Honesty.
frank, it is a shit show,
Yeah.
especially with kids, because, you know, we kind of went through the anticipatory grief process, right? And my wife and I were actually separated during that process, which
Okay.
was really great to add to
Yeah.
the fun,
It's
right? Like,
as if you didn't have enough going on. It's fine.
oh yeah, I'm like, you know what? We don't have enough going on. Let's live in separate homes.
Yeah.
It's just like life is messy when it's messy,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
seems
Murphy's Law is just
exactly, yeah,
real
and
talk.
lots of lessons there. We're back together, of course.
Yeah.
It's been years, but like all of that happened at the same time, and
Yeah.
so our kids experience anticipatory grief as well. And my kids were younger, what, 5 and 8 at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Extremely close with my mom. I mean, she was a third mom, is what the kids say and what we
Okay.
say. She always either lived with us or
Mhm.
very close to us.
Mhm.
And when my wife and I were separated, I bought a house and my mom and I lived together. And so it was really, really lovely. And so the
Wow.
kids had her around all the time.
Oh, I love that.
I think that's probably the hardest part, is that it's hard to have your own grief,
Hmm.
having 2 little humans, and she was my wife's only mom as well.
Yeah.
You're trying to, like, stay above water for yourself
Right.
and for your family, and I think watching my kids go through it was probably the most excruciating thing. Like, it's hard for me,
Hmm.
but watching them and having to tell them when we knew she wasn't gonna make it, it was,
Just
I mean, I would have wanted to be anywhere else. It was
yeah. There's probably just no words really to express how.
no, my older son, I mean,
Perfect.
not that she was not close with my younger son, but
Yeah.
obviously my older son and her
Yeah.
had an amazing bond. They were besties. He would choose her over any friend. Luckily, his friends aren't listening to this.
But in case they ever do,
Yes. Like,
just so
that
you
was his
know.
go-to. He spent every moment with her that he could, and they were
Oh,
besties. So
what a
he
special bond.
very special bond. Yeah. And so when we told him and when she passed, he actually, right before she passed, when we finally told them that she
Hmm.
wasn't going to live and that it would be a
Right.
couple days, because we're really careful how you talk to kids, and
Yes.
especially she's on hospice in her home. It just adds a lot of steps and logistics
Yes. Yeah.
for to navigate in grief.
And doing that age appropriately and
Two
yeah.
different kids, two different ways of receiving information. I don't think people really understand. It's not like this cute sit down family talk. It is
No.
a kid at a time, and processing yourself before and after you talk to them. And our older son wailed in his room for about 24 hours.
Oh, sweet
And I
baby.
still get
Oh my God.
chills. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was the worst thing I've ever experienced,
Oh my
aside
God.
from just watching my mom
I was
suffer.
gonna say, outside of
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
actual death, I'm sure they were probably almost just as difficult in different ways. Like in a sense,
yeah, like watching someone
seeing
you love suffer, whether they're going to live through it or
however it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was debilitating for me. I think the first year, the only reason I really got out of bed was because my wife took on all the slack for me. I have to say, I did not parent, and I still worked full time, and Then I started school 6 months later. I still wanted my life to move forward,
Yeah.
but I was in like this comatose state
Oh, I'm sure. You're
the
just
first year.
survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just just trying to like get up and do things was really
Just
different.
in
Yeah.
and of itself was just excruciating, I bet. And then, yeah, I mean, I didn't have kids at the time that my parents died, but funny enough, I also went through a separation. Just I was after my mom died, but right before my
Oh,
dad
good.
died. So during that anticipatory
Yes.
grief,
Yes.
and a lot of weird parallels. But and we did end up getting back together too. But yeah, I mean, I almost say I don't know how you feel about this. If this was your experience as well, this just like popped into my mind. But I almost like looking back, as difficult as that was, as much as I didn't ask for that, and not to, yeah, say that wasn't difficult at the time, it was almost a blessing in disguise because I was like, in my situation at least, I was like, I didn't need like a relationship that was stressing me out and not working. And I'm not going to say toxic, it wasn't like that bad, but it was, just not good for either of us at that time. On top of working full time and trying to be there for my dad and I was spread entirely too thin. And so I hate to almost say it, but my husband knows this, so it's fine. Like the releasing of that relationship for the time that we released it
Yes.
allowed me time to be there for my dad in ways that he needed me for the last like month and a half or two of his life, whatever it was. Being able to visit him without feeling the need to like get home to my then boyfriend at the time, like
Yeah.
it almost like freed me up a little bit to like be there for my one living parent that I had in his kind of like final weeks and things like that. I don't know. Did you experience it? It's totally fine if you had a different experience, but I'm just
The
curious, like,
podcast, they can't see me nodding, but I am like nodding as you were talking because my wife knows the same. It was time. We
yeah,
needed that separation
yeah.
and it was due anyway. And then
Hmm.
we ended up separating a little bit after my mom was diagnosed.
Hmm.
I was a completely different person once she was diagnosed and
Yeah.
once she knew. I mean, once we knew and like the anger sets in,
Hmm.
just, was such a big part of my anticipatory grief is just being pissed.
Yep.
And anybody who was around me got the other end of that,
Yeah.
unfortunately, of
Yeah.
just that internal
Yes.
rage that your person is going to die and there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it. And so
Yeah.
I made a lot of bad choices and did a lot of terrible things. When I say terrible, I mean like behaviorally, not,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, not, not going out and like hurting anybody or anything.
Like I didn't go crazy here, guys, but just to
Yes,
clarify.
there's a baseline.
Yeah.
But just like not myself, just
Yeah.
very angry, just different outlook on the world. So I feel exactly the same. It
Yeah.
was good to have that space. I think it was nice for my mom, although she was such a part of our family. She got a lot of alone time with me.
Yeah. Which
Y-
as
You
your
know,
daughter, you probably just needed. And
yeah, I
whether
think
you
we,
even realized it at the time, like, of course you realize you need it, but like hindsight is always just like, wow, that was a really special gift.
yeah, it was. I
Weirdly,
mean,
that I got out of all this.
it was. We split the time with the kids, and so when I didn't have the kids, I'd go on weekend trips with my mom alone. And I
Mm,
think it was, like you said, looking back, it was needed. I
yeah.
think it was nice to have that break. We
Yeah.
would not have come back together if I hadn't had that time with my mom and
Yep.
just time to really think for myself as I'm maybe you felt that way too. It's just
Yes.
have that heaviness around you. A relationship is the last thing that
Yeah.
really fits
Yeah.
in. It's really
Not to say anybody here listening has a relationship and is going through
no,
this need to
no,
break up. Just
no.
saying, but for
Just
us, it was
pause
somehow
for a
affected.
year and you'll be better for it. No,
Yeah, exactly.
it worked in our
Oh,
case
that's
with
funny.
no intention of reconciling, but
Yes, me too.
oh,
But
welcome to
here you
Colorado.
go. But if that was your path, and I mean, you're not, you said it, you're not the same after you go through certain things like this. And it's still not like my husband can understand. He admits it to this day. He's like, I can't understand what you've been through in losing both parents, but we just learned to communicate differently, to communicate better. Cause I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. I had never been through anything like this. So I was like, also like you, just not, kind of a shell of a person, really. And trying to process everything myself. Didn't know how to do that. Um, Also probably wasn't the happiest person to be around,
No.
rightfully so. Yeah, so I mean, I think when we ended things and then dad died and then had time to I say this all the time, like kind of get to know myself again, get to understand like, okay, what does life mean for me now? And it sounds like very much like your wife did. Like he came back into my life, but like in a very, very supportive, uplifting way. And, that's you need those people around you. That is not the time to have dysfunction
Right.
around you amongst everything else going on.
I think it was, yeah, I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, remember when I had my own place and we got, I mean, it was really like we joke about it, but it was true because you can only process one loss at a time. And
Yeah,
when we
really.
talk about loss a lot, it's death. But as you know, like separation is
Relationship.
loss,
Yep.
job change, like all of these things are losses and they have to be
Yeah. Yep.
separately.
The future you thought you were
Yep.
gonna have, like, more time with your mom, time with your wife that like, if you sounds like also we're not planning on getting back together, so you're just like, "Okay, now okay," like,
Yeah.
mourning that future, at least for that time being, so
A lot of mourning, and we reconciled right before, a
mhm.
little bit before, I don't remember the time frame. It's all quite a blur now.
It's a blur, yeah,
Like, people ask me time, I'm like, "I don't know." Is there's, like,
yeah.
pre-COVID,
Was there
after
time? I don't know, like
time didn't really
yeah.
exist.
Before
Um,
loved one died, after loved one died, like
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm like, I don't remember a lot before, and if I do recall, it's certainly not in chronological order. I don't know when that happened,
Yeah, seriously.
but we reconciled before my mom got sick, and I
Mhm.
think my wife, not that she wasn't supportive before, but it
Yeah.
was really just a lovely experience kind of, and my mom seeing us back together because she like loved my wife.
Yeah.
Equal to me, depending on the day, they had things that they did together that I don't do. So it was nice
That's
that
so
they had
funny.
their separate things. And when we were separated,
Oh,
they hung out still.
oh
So
my god. I
I
love
didn't
that.
switch at all at the time. Like,
Yeah. You're just like, "Really, you 2?"
Mom, you have to pick me
Yeah,
first.
is this entirely necessary?
That's who my mom was. So she was
Oh,
true to
that's so
character her
funny.
whole life. So I would have expected
Aw,
her to still
that's
love my wife just
authentically
the same. But then, I think it worked out that we accidentally reconciled
mhm.
because I don't know where I would be without my wife helping at the end because hospice was gnarly, all the things, and like having the kids, she really had to take the kids away quite a bit because
Yeah,
hard to know, like when you show them reality and when you don't,
yeah,
and how much do you cry around them? Like these are things that you don't think about. It's like I break down in front of my kids still,
yeah.
and my older one is, see, when we watch movies and there's like a mom that passed it, we watched the second Wakanda, right?
Uh-huh.
Black Panther, sorry, and it's griefy. And so the
Yeah.
whole time, I don't want to give it spoiler alert or anything, but there's some hard parts in there. My son's staring at me the entire time. I'm like, why are you looking at me? He's like, "This is sad." And he's like waiting for me
Just have
to
some
break down.
reaction.
Yeah. I was like, you don't always just break down when something sad is like
Right. Like, he
happening.
can, but, like,
Sometimes it's spontaneous, which he's also learned. Like when we're driving in the car and mom starts hysterically sobbing and you have to pull over. Like
Yeah.
those are things I'm kind of glad that they can see because they're going to learn grief one way or the other, unfortunately. And to
Yeah.
see,
A healthy way of
yeah, this is what it
moving.
looks like.
Yep.
It's not,
Yeah. No.
and, it's ugly crying in the car, kids in school drop off. It was, unexpected. I thought for sure I'm pretty strong willed as well. I'm like, I can keep my shit together, right?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
Can't.
Okay.
And now I don't even try. I was not
Yeah.
a crier before, pretty semi stoic on the outside, right?
Mhm.
I guess that's one thing in this grief journey I've learned is that if I'm sad, I'm a cry.
Yeah.
I try to make it appropriate places, but it's,
It just
no,
just comes when it comes sometimes.
comes when it comes. And I don't want my kids to feel like they have to hold back their feelings or that
Yeah.
that's how you navigate life because I don't want them walking around like not being able to show people what sadness and grief
Yeah.
looks like. My older son, It was beautiful and really heartbreaking, but he went back to school after my mom passed and he started, gosh, he's going to fourth grade. Like I said, I don't know.
Time
I,
ceased
but
to
he's
exist. Yeah.
going into class with a new teacher. And I would say like a week after school started, her mother passed away
Oh,
unexpectedly.
oh my
That
God.
it makes it, but traumatic, like
Yeah, yeah, of
unexpected.
course.
And our older son was just like, we still talk to her, and he was such a part of her grief journey because she would
How
start crying in class.
special. Oh my gosh. Oh,
He-
this
You know,
boy.
I know it's so awful, but I remember him saying, "Well, my mom does that. It's okay." Like,
Oh,
it's just it's the part of life, and it's a hard lesson that you don't want your kids to learn. But to know
yeah.
that he took our experience
Wow.
to teach you know that he knows that you could just spontaneously cry for no reason in class with all these third or fourth graders,
Yeah.
and that it's okay.
Oh, that's so like emotionally mature, like for that age, especially. Like, what a healthy, beautiful example to set, and something that he's now going to carry with him and then spread that love and compassion and empathy and stuff towards other people. Like, that is what we need. That is the point of this podcast. That is the point of these conversations.
Yes.
I just want to like sing it from the rooftops because that's the essence, I know, of what like the work that you're trying to do. And this is actually a perfect segue into sort of my next question and next sort of phase of this conversation is, obviously the community that you have built. Like I said, I've talked about your content. I love it. I am living for it. You also came out with a new journal recently that I want to talk about. So I want to like hand it off to you, but I want to just kind of get an idea too and asking you this just what has your journey been like since her death? I mean, it sounds like for at minimum at least a year, it was just very, very painfully, excruciatingly difficult to parent, to maybe even like function properly, all the
Yes.
things. Do you feel how do I want to word this? Like and like you turned a corner at some point, and I'm like curious too because getting into the work that we do and talking about it and and I know you're again going back to school and doing some amazing things there, so I want you to touch on that, but like you've clearly in my perspective at least have been inspired by this and just your want to help people and show up and be there and help people through this and make it okay and make people feel supported. So clearly something after whether it was before or after your mom died just maybe shifted for you or something. So just talk to me about like what life has looked like after that and then how it's gotten you to the place of doing the work that you are now.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll say I was unhappy in my career for several years anyway.
Mhm.
So change is hard for people. And, you kind of get used to having this job. And then when my mom got sick, they were really good to me. So I had time with my mom. I feel like it all kind of worked out.
Mhm.
But I had talked to her many times. And as she was, of course, on her deathbed, because this is the dark humor and where I get it,
Yeah.
although she was like
Let's hear it.
optimistic Southern lady, like I think a week before she passed, she's like, don't be unhappy. Know that the little things
Mm.
matter and do what you want to do. AKA, stop bitching about your fucking job and do something different.
Obsessed with this
And she's like,
advice.
make sure to write a book. Because she
Oh,
knew since I was a little kid, I always wanted to write a book. Now, did I want it to be a grief journal? No. And that's probably not what she wanted it to be either.
maybe that's how it manifested itself now, but you
Yes.
never know.
Part one.
Oh,
Like,
good call.
I'm sorry, Mama, you would love it to be like a fluffy young adult
Yeah.
novel. That's sweet.
You're like,
But
I'm getting there, okay,
yeah,
with time.
don't know if that's my style, but I did what I promised because I was like, Mommy, please don't do the deathbed wish thing where you
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's like, but you'll have to do it. I'm like, shit. I know.
You're like, that's so cliche, but
It
please.
did. She did. She's like, please do this. I'm like, all right. Well,
God
when
damn
someone
you.
asks in that way, you have to. But I will say when you ask about like the journey itself, like I said, the first year I was pretty much non-functional and numb in a sense that you got to do some things. They're just, I had to get out of bed. I
Mhm.
had to parent sometimes. I mean, luckily, like my wife took the bulk of it. It's all a little bit of a blur.
Yeah.
I will say the second year was much harder for me. When
Yeah.
I entered year 2, it was like the fog lifted
Yeah. Yeah.
and reality hit of
Mhm.
like, I started school. I still did all the things, right, of like moving my future forward, and I
Right.
still moved my life forward, but just robotic.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
not really
Autopilot almost.
like,
You're
this
just
will
like,
pay off later, but for now, I don't really feel it.
yeah, I'm existing, maybe not really like living though,
Yes.
in a
Yeah,
way.
just one foot in front of the other and hope this works out
Yeah.
kinda thing, and, yeah, I think the second year, I wasn't because I also wasn't prepared. I am a little type A, and so I'm like, "Great, I will mourn the first year, and my mom doesn't want me to be sad. She really wanted me to live life, enjoy the small moments, and so that's what I'll do."
Yeah.
How dumb of me to not, because and dumb, because I have no better word for it, just like,
Yeah.
you don't know until you know,
Like that
and
was silly.
come on, Megan, you're smarter than that, but you don't know how
You
you're
don't
gonna
know what
react.
you don't know. Yeah.
You don't know, and
Yep.
people can tell you all day. I remember a friend who lost her wife many years before told me, and I didn't pay attention, but she said at the time, she's like, "The second and third year are much harder
Yep.
because the world keeps spinning
Yep.
and yours has stopped." And
Mhm.
then it was like year 2, I'm like, "Oh shit,
Yeah.
mom
Like, oh,
isn't."
this is actually my reality.
Yes,
Oh,
this
this
is
is
it.
not gonna end.
Right.
Like, this isn't, yeah. Like the shock
Yes, it wore off.
wears off, generally speaking, and you're just like, and yeah, I say that about like kind of year 3 for
Yeah,
me. It's like it really I was like, oh my God, this is like actually forever. And like God willing, I have a long life ahead of me, but that
yeah,
is again, God willing, decades that I'm
right.
gonna have to like navigate this and hitting milestones myself and with my daughter and all that. And I know you can empathize with that
Yeah,
feeling too. And they're just like, you're just like, they will not, wherever you believe our loved ones are. I feel my parents are around me, but physically here, right?
yes.
Not physically here to
Look them in the
talk.
eye,
Exactly. Get a
smile,
hug, get their actual advice without feeling like you got to just like hear it from some,
like,
you know,
just stand
somewhere
up and
beyond the grave. Like, really? Yeah, it's humbling and a tough reality to
yeah,
swallow.
I hit
Yeah.
finished year 2 in June, was 2 years,
Hmm.
and I'm just learning it does it, and that's you mentioned, why I got into this field and why I wanted to
Yeah.
shift and help people, and there's all kind of people in the grief space, and everyone is needed, right? Because everybody goes through this grief journey in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
It depends on our personality, our relationship with the person that we lost, and so there can't just be one type of grief counselor or coach. It doesn't work.
Definitely. People
We
resonate with different things, or they need a different type of love towards it, or maybe they would resonate with you and the dark humor and a little bit more grit. And some people might be like, I need to be coddled right now. Like I
Yes,
cannot, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
it's
Yeah.
personality and timing of where you are in the grief
But
space, and what I learned in starting this page, because I originally just started because I'm like, I have to write.
outlet. Yeah.
Who knows? I'm just gonna start it for once in my life and not overthink the hell out of it,
That's
which is what I
awesome.
like to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But I will say
Okay.
that's one thing I learned in the journey is just do it.
Yeah.
Just get out of your head and do it
Let it
and
flow.
see
Let
what
it go.
happens.
Yeah.
Let part of the journey be learning that you just keep walking and the path will fall in
It'll
front.
unfold. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it was a very hard reality for me and something that my mom lived by.
Mhm.
I'm sure she's happy. She's like, I told you the path would come up.
She's
I can
like,
definitely hear her saying,
yeah.
told you so.
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted to just be authentic to myself. And if people resonated with that, if it resonated with
Great.
people,
Heck
then
yeah.
great. And I will say it has. And
Yeah.
what I didn't expect is that I have a lot of people who follow me or reach out and have lost children.
Hmm.
And I think even when you're in your grief journey, different types of losses are still unexpected and hard to navigate. And so
Yeah.
I'm still learning as I go and grieving as I go, grieving my old self and like
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
how other people are going through that journey. But me being so raw and
Yeah.
wearing it's just me. It's really
Unapologetic. I love it. Yeah.
what's in my head is really what I write.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives people a great idea of what I'm thinking constantly. But it does resonate with people in early grief, especially, and a lot of people who have lost children, which has
Wow.
been a really powerful and hard reality for
Yeah.
me. But I'm grateful that I'm available and that people know what this feels like and that I'm honest enough that some people don't feel alone. That is really what
Mm-hmm.
my meaning, I guess. I hate when people say making meaning or purpose, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to come up with another phrase at some point. But it's really like we got to coin some
It's
other
just like,
thing.
but you're kind of, yeah, you do. I totally get that. I feel the same way. I used to say it was more of my meaning and my purpose in life, but there is. It's interesting in some of the training that I've done to become sort of like a dharma coach, like a soul purpose coach and things here. Maybe there some people are of the belief that we have sort of like a soul contract, so to speak, and that
Yep.
we do go through the things that we do, and that is ultimately meant to take us on a path that we maybe never would have anticipated. I say it all the time. I never thought I'd have a podcast talking about grief and the deaths of my parents at age 33. Like, the math never mathed for me like that.
Oh,
And someone asked me once, they were like, "Do you feel like your parents maybe needed to die to have you go on this path?" Now they worded it a lot better than I just
yes.
did.
No, no, I get
Not
it.
like, "Did they need to die?" I was like, "No, they sure did not." But however they worded it, it was much more eloquent. But it did make me think, and I was just like, I don't know, and I might never, but that is an interesting way to put it. And it's more someone else had worded this really well to me too. They're like, it's not making meaning out of like the death itself. It's
Right.
just what can you maybe do to just serve the world a little bit better or again, for lack of a better term, what learnings can you take away from your experience, from everything that you have been through, from what it's taught you, however you want to word it, and just apply it to your life? Maybe it does lead to you totally pivoting your career, and you end up, yes, you are without these very important people in your life, but then in some weird, twisted way, you're also extremely fulfilled and much happier, and there is something that does fulfill your soul in that, if that makes sense. Hopefully that distinction is like clear. I don't know. That's how I've kind of come to interpret it a little bit. So it's not so black and white as like, okay, because when you might say like, okay, yeah, I need to make some meaning or I need to find purpose from this loss. That's not the point. Like, and that's very black and white to me. It's like,
Yeah, and that also
yeah.
feels like it does diminish the grief of others because then there are
Yeah.
people, I'm like, just because I changed careers and found this path in grief doesn't mean that everybody has to, nor would I
Right.
recommend it because it's not
Absolutely.
for everybody. But I told somebody they didn't have the best response, but because I talk about, I don't like the term silver lining. I don't like
Yeah.
purpose. Like
Yeah.
maybe that is what it is later. And like you said,
Yeah.
we're honoring this new part of ourselves. But I do tell people I think that I know my mom well enough that I feel like because she had a really terrible ending and it was not what she wanted and what
Yeah.
we
Or we could have
expect.
ever expected
Yeah,
for
it
a
was,
loved one. Yeah.
of course, when you look back, I'm like, that it was the worst case of
Mhm.
any situation as we navigated
You
it.
could
We
possibly
did,
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, it was terrible. And then I thought, to some extent, I would never say this to clients, right? And I would never say this to people that I'm working with. But for me, I feel like it was a gift from my mom. Like, what is a mother if not we suffer for our children?
Oh,
And I feel like her suffering was a gift to get me moving, to get me
wow.
out of grief enough. I mean, I'm still in it,
Yeah.
out of it enough to know that there is something bigger ahead of me. And
Mm.
not because of grief, because I would have done something anyway. I was already like itching to move forward.
Yeah.
But I think what she gave me in her suffering at the end was this fire that she knew I already had in me. And if
Mhm.
I did not have somewhere to direct that fire, would have imploded. And she
Yeah.
knew that about me. So I feel like it was her last gift to me was like take my pain and get it out and
Ugh.
just move forward and help other people so that they don't feel so isolated because it really is like, you know,
the most
You feel
isolating
lonely even
thing.
in a room of
Yep.
100 people. And
Yep.
I don't want anybody else to feel that. So if there's anything I can say from like the depths of my soul that feels so dark, and then I have people that are like, oh, I feel that too. Even if just one person says that, then
Mhm.
maybe that day they'll know that they can get out of bed, that it's worth them taking a step out of their room that day, because it does feel like some days
Mhm.
really just don't want to be there. And I don't say that lightly, and I certainly don't mean it flippant, but
Mhm. Mhm.
there were days in the
No, that
process.
is a very unfortunate reality for many, many people. They're
Yeah,
like, I am not sure how I'm going to get through this. And I, not meaning that very surface level, like truly, I am not doing well. And being
right.
able
And I had many days like that, even with a family. Like, people don't really, it doesn't matter what you have to live for,
Mhm.
what you have around you. It's just this gaping hole is there. And some days you don't see a way out of it. And
Yep.
I don't think people talk about that enough, which is why I want to be
Us
so
too.
open and honest in my journey, because
It's
people
very
need to know
scary.
that everybody, we may look smiley some days, we may
Mhm.
look like I'm still working and I'm still raising my kids.
Got our shit together.
Oh, we got our shit
Nope.
together. Except I'm also sobbing in the shower and I don't want to do anything. That was so much a part of my reality.
Yeah.
Still is, but mostly early on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't do it. I
No.
really can't do it.
Yeah.
And I want to be a voice for somebody when they're in that moment of just real shit. Just you
Yeah.
can't, a deep dark hole. And I guess that is really what I hope is that suffering that my mom went through and that I went through, all of us grievers go through,
Yeah.
that there's some voice that people hear so they're not alone. Because I think that
Yeah.
there's nothing else we can say, right? There's no cliche
Yeah.
that's helpful. It's
Mhm.
just, it's shitty and I'm here with you.
Real quick interruption here, and then we'll get back to this episode. If you're someone who is experiencing some form of loss and are trying to navigate the complexities of grief, which you likely are in some capacity if you've stumbled upon this podcast, then this message is for you. If you haven't heard about my Life with Grief membership and community yet, this is truly something you need to check out. This membership is here to guide you into living a deeper, more meaningful, and full life after experiencing loss. Who doesn't want that, right? I created this membership because I know what it's like to navigate and cope with grief on a daily basis, and I know the tools and support it takes to do this effectively. I've done the work myself, and I've coached people just like you to do the same. It comes down to having impactful, effective resources and tools at your disposal, having the right support around you from people who can understand and empathize with your grief, and having encouragement and inspiration around you consistently to not only elicit and spark change, but to keep it and keep the positive momentum going. Check out the details linked in the description, and I hope to see you in there. Yeah. That's all you can really do. And I think a lot of us on Instagram and stuff like talk about this. It's like those at least statements, right? Like at least you had X amount of time or whatever platitudes we want to throw at people. It really is so simple at the end of the day. It really is just holding space. And that space is hard to hold. Like I understand why grief makes people uncomfortable. I do. It's awkward, it's painful if you especially if you can't relate, like, a lot of this might sound easier said than done to people here listening or something, but, I think if anyone walks away with anything today, it's just exactly what you just said. There really is no perfect thing to say, so it's okay to not feel the need to come up with the perfect thing to say, like, take the pressure off then and just be like, I want to show up for you however I can. And then either take that action or just, come over and watch a show with them that they like and just like bring some food to make sure they're eating or whatever. It's just those little actions or whatever it is that is appropriate for that
Yeah.
griever to just, yeah, it's not about fixing it, right? Because it
The
just
big
can't be
whammy.
fixed.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the big whammy. And
Uh,
I had friends that just sent me memes for probably like the first year.
I love
And I look back and I'm like, you're amazing.
Yeah, even just those little things it can just shift your day just a little bit, put you in a little bit better of a mood, laugh, God forbid, just
Yeah.
like for like a hot second
Yeah.
and just give you a little, just that little bit of light, like, oh my God, it's still there. It is so small, or it's so fleeting or whatever, but like it's out there.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah.
that's better than the toxic positivity.
Mhm.
I talk about that a lot too. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of my counseling journey will be based around that, and grief too, is that really teaching people who have not experienced grief, because I don't you don't want people to experience grief to understand it. And you also can't really understand it until you're in it. But it's
Yeah.
also just teaching people what to say and what not to say. And
Yeah.
if you're unsure, just sit with us, and you don't really have to say anything. It's also a note to us grievers that kind of I'm really good at setting boundaries anyway. So of course in my grief I was pretty good about it. Lost a lot of people in my life because I was really clear on what
Yeah.
is not
What you did and
tolerated,
what you didn't need. Yeah.
exactly what was helpful and not helpful, and what was really harmful.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we have to normalize that for grievers too, is just
Yeah.
thank you, but that's not helpful. Like that
Mhm.
sentence really can get us a
Very
long,
empowering.
very empowering, and not not hurtful to the person on the receiving end.
Yeah.
But you were like, well, at least you'll see your mom again one day, or at least she's in heaven. I'm like,
Literally, I cannot.
I have a lot of at least in my own head, right? Like we have
Yeah.
our own. Like there are
Yeah.
things
We don't
I
need yours too.
know.
Great
Yeah,
way of putting that. Yes.
yes, I have my own, and it's okay for me to say, at least I had 2 years with my mom, because
Mhm.
I do feel that way. I
Yeah.
had 2 years knowing that she was going to die soon, and so for
Yeah.
me, I am grateful for
Yeah.
that time I had with her. If someone else said that to me, it would
Mhm.
be it would be very inappropriate. But we do
Yeah.
have our own, at least, and our own. They're not even platitudes. I guess
Yeah.
they're hoping, and they're ways that we acknowledge that for us,
Yeah.
we're grateful for the way things happened in some ways. Because if my
Mhm.
mom had died unexpectedly,
Right.
where would I be? So
Yeah. I've thought
we do
about that.
think of those things for
Mhm.
ourselves, but we
Yeah.
can't say them to other
We
people.
don't need other people thinking it for us, let alone verbalizing those things out loud to us. We're like, thanks, I'll take it from here. I got it. I got
I'm
enough
gonna
going on.
pass. I'm gonna
I don't need,
pass.
yeah. Thank you for that distinction, truly, because I think that's a really great way of putting that. It's just like, we're already kind of coming at ourselves with, again, not platitudes maybe is the right word, but like these are thoughts we're already having probably, and a lot of supporters like probably don't think of that, right? Or they just, they don't want to see us suffering, so of course they're going to try and make us feel better however they can or whatever. But sometimes it's just, yeah, it just goes
Yeah.
overboard, or just it ends up backfiring. And it's just, yeah, just that grief literacy I think is so important. And I know the work that you're doing, and just again everything you're sharing is really helping with that. And just to kind of wrap this up, I love to kind of just end with like, is there maybe just like one or two tips or a piece of wisdom or guidance or something that if someone here listening is just really struggling today or any day in the future, what would you say to that person? Is there something that you just can think of that really helped you get through it at the end of the day, or a mindset shift? I mean, whatever you want to share that you think could be impactful for someone.
I'd probably list 20, but maybe I'll just give one. Like, I mean, I think what really helped me, because what I hear about a lot, and even being so close with my mom, there's always things that are left unsaid.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you think you say everything,
Yeah.
times that means guilt or resentment, or maybe it's just the last I love you. It could be anything, right? But there's always things in grief when someone passes, the what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
They're the worst. And
Oh
they
my God, they're so
really,
bad.
they're in the grief journey. I think for every person I've ever talked to about grief, they're like,
Yep.
what if this, or if I'd only done that, or if
It's
our
coulda,
last
woulda, shoulda.
conversation. Yeah. I mean, they're heavy. And
They're
so
brutal.
one thing that I did, my mom had a lot of, I don't even know what you call them. They're like little pieces of paper that are environmentally friendly, but they
Mhm.
burn instantly in the air, and you write
Ooh.
notes on them.
Oh, I
I
love
don't
that.
know where she got them, but because I thought, Mom, it's a fire danger to do that in Colorado with my children. But that's what she didn't like rules.
God, I love it.
A lot of that. Like and I say you don't have to be a writer to do it, but I wrote a letter to my mom and I would write things like, I love you, or have my kids write notes to her, like
Oh,
things
I
they
love
say,
that.
and then burn them in our fire pit out back. It's cathartic to get it out in
That's
some way and to take, even if it's not like writing a note, but to take 1 to 2 minutes a day to just do something as a distraction, whether, creating a memory wall or anything to honor them and
mhm.
to just, it's like a grief ritual for one to
Yeah.
two, whatever that looks like for people. But I think that's my, I guess, my first piece of advice, really. If you give, I wouldn't even call it advice in grief, but
Yeah,
a
just
step
something
by,
that's you found helpful or cathartic or yeah.
yeah, because we have to remember that our nervous system is shot. We're
Mhm,
dysregulated constantly. You're in a state of fight or flight.
mhm,
So you have to take a moment to ground yourself. And so whether that means like addressing some feelings that or something that wasn't said, or
mhm.
just breathing,
Yeah,
or putting a photo up and making a little memory wall, anything that gets you into that grief zone in a
yeah.
healthy way
Yes, yeah.
is really what I learned and still do to this day. Is I got to take a couple minutes to
I love that. Just
write a note
witnessing
or
it.
breathe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, giving yourself and then yeah, and I feel like I know a lot of people I've spoken to too, they're just like, also with that, that can some allowing that space for it to be felt, even if it's so brief, can sometimes help. It's not gonna necessarily like resolve every trigger. It's not to say things aren't gonna come up that might throw you off. But if you just give it that little space and time that it needs to just like come out, whether that's crying, anger, whatever, just to be witnessed, it can, I'm not saying it always will, but it can make those more intense moments if they were to come out throughout the day, perhaps a little less debilitating potentially. Or it's
Yeah. And I
and
think
it's
if you do
honoring
it,
our people too.
yeah, it is honoring them. I think, sorry to cut you off.
No, no, that's okay. Yeah, that's all I was gonna
Yeah,
say.
and I think doing it consistently
Yeah,
is
that's
really
important.
what's helpful
Yes.
because then it does become like a regulation type thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do talk about grief rituals, even with my kids, of
Yeah.
just taking a minute,
Mhm.
actively be sad, which I know sounds, you know, not something that people want to initially do, but I'm like,
Right. You're just like, I don't wanna hurt, thanks.
yeah,
Bye.
you're not so sad. Thanks a lot. But really
Yeah.
sitting in it
Yeah.
and being present and feeling that sadness sometimes allows us to get through the day because really most people in grief, you get 3 days bereavement and you got to go back to work and you still have to raise your kids and you still have to put gas in your car and get groceries.
Crazy.
Like it's
Yeah.
insane. All our culture around loss is insane anyway. So
Yeah.
I think we have to then make the space
Yeah.
for ourselves. And I still lost my shit and I still was angry, like all the things, but you know, if I didn't take the time that I needed, then what?
Yep.
You still have to take the time to honor yourself and your grief at the
Mhm.
same time and really make space for it. Because, like you said, I mean, it will keep growing whether you like
Yes.
it or not.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can tend to it or you can leave it. It's a beast either way.
Yeah. You just control it just a little better. Not that control is the goal per se, but it's just like it's just I feel like an action step we can take in order for it not to overcome us at all or quite so much or it's kind of grieving on our own terms a
Yeah.
little bit and just yeah just feeling empowered to do that really quick before we completely wrap up because when you reminded me when you were talking about just having like a little bit of a ritual or something that you can do every day, I would just want to circle back to your journal because you just came out
Okay.
with
I'll
that.
allow
If
it.
you want to just talk about that for a minute or two, I just want to give you the space to do that because first of all it's so fun and cute and I saw some of the prompts and things. So, but I think that's again just a great tool. I have my own journal for that same reason. It's like that's been a very helpful tool for me in my own journey, which is why I made one. But yeah, so I just wanted to give you a minute to
I
talk
feel
about
like I
that.
would love to hold your journal and my journal up together because I think they're so complementary
Yeah.
because yours is so beautiful with the light colors and I really love it. And then mine's all like dark and twisty and glittery.
With like a little bit of like glitter, but like
Yeah,
not and
ripped off, but
yeah.
something for everybody, right? Like there is
Yeah.
something for everybody. But
Yeah.
when I was thinking about that grief journal, it dawned on me one day to write that, because I remember saying, I don't remember if it was on a post or I said to somebody, I was like, I'm so sick of all people throwing glitter at my shit. Just let it be shit.
Yeah.
You don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
You mentioned like people want to fix it, right?
Yeah.
I don't need you to put glitter on my shit.
Yeah.
I need just to leave it alone. Just
Yeah.
let me be in the shit. It's the only way to get through it, is
Yep.
just sit in it.
Just let me have my moment. Yeah.
How glitter-free grief came to be is
Oh,
that, and that journal is just wanted people to be able to walk through it and
yeah.
have some prompts. You don't have to be a writer to do it. I want to make sure
Right.
it's like no pressure. You don't have to write
Yeah.
consecutively or every
Right.
day. It's just putting anything on paper releases it from your body. It's
Yes.
a low level EMDR
Yeah. I
type
say
of
the same
technique. Is
thing.
just
Yeah, because we can have a lot of ruminating thoughts as we're grieving, a lot of all that. So it's really good to just like have that moment to just get it out. And I love that yours has prompts too, because like that was one of the reasons that I made it like both prompts and free writing. So I'm like, if you feel like free writing, go for it. For me personally, I struggle with free writing sometimes. Like, not that I don't have things to say, but I'm kind of that seems more intimidating sometimes than just like being prompted. And sometimes we're in the midst of grief. It's like, okay, I want to help myself. Okay, I want to have this little like routine or whatever, but like I'm shot right now. Like I can't think to save my life. Like I need someone to kind of like initiate the
just like you
conversation with
prompting me
myself.
for the podcast. Cause I'm like, if
Yeah.
you just sent me in here willy nilly, I probably would have been a deer in headlights. You know, like
Yeah.
we're still griefy and
Yeah.
even though we're functioning, like
Right.
it's still nice to have the prompts and the ability to like walk people through it, because
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
is getting grief out of your body, at least the traumatic part of it,
Right.
out from your mind and body, out onto paper. And I remember I thought it was like kind of a funny moment when my very first counselor, who I've now known for like 25 years, always wanted me to journal. And I'm a writer, but I'm
Hmm.
like, she's like, you should journal this. I'm like, oh, I'm so tired of you telling me to write it down. Like, I want to write what I want to write. I didn't want to write
Yeah.
my feelings.
Yeah.
And so now I think it's kind of funny that I wrote a grief
Full
journal
circle moment.
after I was like, but I don't want to, because
Boycotted it.
I know I was like,
Oh, that's so funny.
I think it's helpful. And I tell people all the time, like, you don't need to be a writer. You're not sharing this with people.
Right. It's for you. Yeah.
It's just a way, a means to an end. It's a way to get some of that dysregulation and trauma, panic, all of those feelings
Mhm.
out onto paper, because it does release it from your
Yeah.
body. I mean,
Yep.
just like
A little
exercise.
bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could do talk
Better
therapy.
than nothing as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned. You know what I mean?
right. And
Ah,
in early grief too, is why I wanted to lead with a journal, because not everybody wants to get therapy. I'm in the counseling space and
yeah.
I took a break from counseling after my
Yeah.
mom. You
Yeah.
can't talk about it all the time, even
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
used to counseling. Like
Yeah.
you just don't want to process it right away. And I just wanted to be sad. And I mean, I did go initially and then I took a break. And I think
Hmm.
in early grief, especially, I want people to have a resource
Hmm.
without that resource having to involve you functioning like
Yes.
in
Yes.
with other people. It's too
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people thrive in that community kind of a thing and they
Yeah.
like that and they need that or some people are just they go inward. I was that person. I was like, I need to figure this out for myself. I need to be introspective here. I can't like I did a little bit of therapy at first too, but it was almost more over the breakup than it even was around the deaths in some kind of twisted way. But and it was helpful. But yeah, it was like I was like, this is just my path right now and I need to navigate this for
Not as
myself. So
Me too. I turn inward and I'm not a
yeah.
support group kind of gal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there are people, as I co-facilitated groups for cancer patients, but for my personal grief at the
Yeah.
time, I wasn't, I needed to do it on my own. I'm already an introvert. And so you kind of go with what you know. And
Yep.
I'm
What you're
more,
comfortable with too. Yeah. I mean, fair
yeah. So
enough.
you do what you know, especially in grief. You go back to old habits.
Hmm.
You do, for better or for worse. You
Yeah.
stick with what you know, because you can't take on anything new when you're in such a heartbroken space.
Absolutely. Yeah. You got enough going on.
Thanks for tagging in my
Yeah.
journal.
Oh my God, of course. I mean, how could a fellow
That's
journal
journal buddies.
creator, how could I not?
I know. I
Megan,
appreciate it.
I love this whole conversation so, so much. We got some humor, we got some depth, but we just hit on so many wonderful things. Where can people find you, potentially work with you, just get to know you, find the journal, all the things? And this will all be linked in the show notes as well, of course.
Okay. Yes, I have a new website. It's glitterfreegrief.com. And so my journal is on there and glitterfree grief on Instagram as well. So I'll be there swearing anytime people need it.
I love it. So unapologetically yourself. I love that so much about you. Thank you so much for being here today. This was such a fun conversation. We dig into so many topics here today too. I feel like there's like something for not to sound
The
so
queen
cliche.
of segue. I'm like, but let me
Yeah.
tell you about this.
Yeah. Let's go down this dark alley
Yes.
here real quick. I
Oh,
love it.
so lovely to talk with you. And
You
I've
too.
been waiting for this conversation. So it was really great. I think there's a lot of parallels within our story.
There
And
are. Yeah.
terrible as it is, it's better to do it with a community, I've learned. And even though we're introverted and we like to turn inward, it's nice to know that we're not alone and that we have
Yeah.
people that are on similar paths and still upright. And for me,
Yes.
that's
We
a win.
live to talk about it, and that's all we do now is talk.
No, goodness.
I know. I love it. All right. Thank you, Megan. I really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, ways to work with me, to shop my daily journal, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you haven't left a rating or review, please do so. I would so appreciate it. Or if you feel so inclined to share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. I'll catch you in the next episode.